The spectacle of parliamentary proceedings is as predictable as it is frustrating, an endless game of deflection, selective outrage, and hypocrisy. And yet, the current political climate is far from ordinary, teetering on the precipice of deeper cynicism. On one side, we have Keir Starmer, the so-called savior of the Labour Party, whose every move seems calculated for maximum appeal to the middle ground, while on the other, the Conservatives, fractured, desperate, and lacking coherent leadership, flounder in an attempt to hold on to any semblance of credibility. But beneath this theatre of politics, one glaring issue stands out: the betrayal of principle, exemplified by Starmer's silence on the fundamental issue of Brexit. It is impossible to ignore the irony that at the heart of British politics lies a glaring disconnect between the promises made to the electorate and the actions taken by those in power. Starmer, who initially appeared to position himself as a leader who would not only unite but also reinvigorate Labour's commitment to the working class, has now chosen political convenience over principle. He has waffled on the most divisive and defining issue of the decade, Brexit. His rhetoric has shifted so dramatically that it can no longer be seen as anything other than opportunism in its most insidious form. Starmer's leadership, which should have been defined by the ability to provide a clear alternative to the Conservative establishment, instead mirrors that same establishment's chameleon-like ability to say one thing and do another. The Labour leader's support for a second Brexit referendum, his promise to negotiate a better deal with the European Union, and his subsequent silence once he assumed office are the epitome of political betrayal. He sold the public the idea that Labour would fight for the people's right to a say, only to abandon that cause when it became politically inconvenient. Starmer's vacillation on the subject of Brexit is not just a failure of leadership, it is a failure of principle, and it is one that will haunt him as the public's trust in politics continues to erode. Yet, amidst this betrayal, the Conservatives remain content to lob criticism at Starmer for his alleged misconduct during the pandemic, claiming that a supposed meeting with a voice coach during lockdown is an issue of national significance. This is the sort of distraction we are expected to swallow in the name of accountability. Kemi Badenoch, the ambitious Conservative minister, may think she is scoring points with the public by raising these trivial concerns, but she is simply playing into the narrative of political gamesmanship that has long plagued the UK. The focus should not be on the minutiae of lockdown breaches. It should be on the far larger issue of the government's catastrophic handling of the pandemic and the long-term economic consequences of Brexit. The hypocrisy on both sides is staggering. The Labour Party, which once championed the working class, has become a mirror image of the establishment it once sought to topple. Starmer's failure to take a definitive stance on Brexit signals that the political establishment is now so deeply entrenched that it is almost impossible to distinguish between the two major parties. The Conservatives, meanwhile, have proven themselves utterly incapable of governing without scandal and chaos. Both parties are more interested in maintaining their positions and fending off their critics than in delivering meaningful change to the electorate. It's time for a reckoning. The British public, who have been the subject of repeated betrayals by their political leaders, deserve a genuine alternative. There is no shortage of voices within the Labour Party who are deeply dissatisfied with Starmer's leadership, yet they have been drowned out by the tide of political pragmatism that dominates Labour's current strategy. The party should return to its roots, prioritise the interests of working-class citizens, and offer a real vision for the future, one that does not waver based on the shifting sands of political convenience. What's most striking about the current state of affairs is how little difference there is between the two parties. Both are guilty of prioritizing party politics over the welfare of the people. The Conservatives, under the disastrous leadership of Rishi Sunak, have fostered a culture of dishonesty and incompetence, all while the Labour Party, with Starmer at the helm, has succumbed to the same opportunism and lack of courage. This is not a battle for the future of the country. This is a fight to maintain power at all costs. The British people deserve better. Starmer may believe that his political strategy is sound, but it is clear that he has misread the public mood. The electorate is not fooled by rhetoric, and the silence on the most pressing issues facing the nation, Brexit's aftermath, the economic collapse that followed, and the erosion of public services, speaks volumes. Starmer's reluctance to offer a definitive stance on Brexit demonstrates that he has abandoned any hope of leading the nation with conviction. It is this lack of leadership that will continue to plague his tenure, unless he takes bold, unapologetic action and returns to the principles that once defined Labour. If Labour is to have any hope of mounting a challenge to the Tories, it must distance itself from the destructive forces that have corrupted the political establishment. Whether that means embracing a new, braver form of politics or simply acknowledging that the old ways of political calculation have failed, it is time for action. The British public no longer has the patience to endure the endless cycle of deceit, delay, and distractions. The clock is ticking, and the time for meaningful change is now. Anything less will be a betrayal that no one can afford to ignore.